Well, hey Harvest, whether you're watching online or whether you're watching in a Harvest home, we're so glad that you decided to join us as we kick off this new series, Under Pressure. I just want you to know, we would love for you to go to our YouTube page and like it. Also Facebook and Instagram, harvest.247. We would love for you to go and like that. Follow us there to get all the information. And you can also go to harvest247.org and you can click the giving link if you want to partner with us financially. We would love for you to do that. We'd be honored for that. And so we're excited to kick off Under Pressure. And so here's kind of the point. All of us are living under pressure, and for many of us, the day and age that we live in may feel like the most pressure we've ever lived under, just societal. But all of us have these moments where we've lived under pressure. It's a family thing, it's a financial thing, it's a job thing, it's a societal thing. And so for us as people who are trying to follow Jesus, and for us who as a church want all people to know Jesus and grow with Him, what are the people who have followed God in the past done when they have faced immense pressure, and what can we glean from their lives? So we're going to take a look at 4 characters from the Old Testament. A couple you're going to know really well, a couple you're not going to be so familiar with, and so I'm excited to kick off this series today. Now, there was a Halloween. I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and we were getting ready to go trick-or-treating. And then back in that day and age, my dad would dress up our whole neighborhood. We knew all of our neighbors. We knew everybody. And everybody would dress up and all that kind of stuff. And so my dad dressed up as Dracula. And so he comes out of the bathroom, and my 6-year-old self, let's say, sees him. And immediately I am afraid, and I run out of the house, up the street, and I hide. Because I am petrified of what my dad looks like. He looks like Dracula, like the white face, jet black hair, cape, all the things. And so as I'm running, I'm like, I got to get as far away from him as I can, and so then I hide. Finally, when my mom and some other neighbors find me, I begin to let them know, begin to kind of justify why I ran. I begin to make excuses. Well, I'm afraid. I didn't know that was my dad. I didn't want someone to find me. But eventually, I had to go back to the house and face Dad, because he wasn't going to do the thing that I wanted him to do, because I wanted him to change everything. Like, I'm negotiating with my mom and my neighbors to go back to Dad and say, you got to take off the makeup, you got to take off the Dracula outfit, and then be something else, and then I'll come back. I'm trying to justify, I'm trying to make excuses for why I'm not going to go back. But ultimately, my mom and my neighbors did exactly what was best for me. They made me go back to the house and face my dad, still dressed as Dracula, so that I could understand that he wasn't as scary as I initially thought. Now, in that, there is a pattern in that story. And the pattern is, I'm afraid, so I run. When I'm running, I justify and make excuses for my running. And then I have to go back and face my past. And here's the thing. What I know about most of us, that's very similar to our stories. Something happens in our life, it scares us, so we run. As we're running, or as we're away, as we're hiding, we justify and make excuses for why we're running. And for some of us, our story ends right there. And we have been running for decades. We have been running for years. We have been running for months. But for some of us, after our running and after our hiding and after our excuse making, we have come back to that scenario, that person, that situation, that boss, confronting that issue with ourselves, and we have realized, you know what, it wasn't as scary as I originally thought. And so there's a lesson in that, and there's a lesson in the life and the story of Moses that can teach us that when we're living under pressure and we become afraid and we start running and we start hiding and we start making excuses, there's a part of the story of Moses that says there's one way to move beyond the past, and there's one way to move beyond the fear. And so as we dive into this, I'm going to have a lot of scripture. We're going to go a little bit at a time and walk through the story of Moses from a 30,000 foot view and come to realize that when we get afraid and we begin to run and we start to hide, what is the only option, the one option that we can do to move forward? Because here's what I'm going to say. The thing that helps us move forward is going to be counterintuitive to taking a step forward. And so let's pick this story up. Moses in Exodus 2, 11 through 12 and 15. And this is the thing Moses runs. This is what it says. One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens. So he was an Egyptian. He was adopted into the Egyptian lifestyle. He lived in the palace. He lived in the castle. And so Moses grows up and he's looking out over his people, the Egyptians. However, he sees the Egyptian beating a Hebrew. And the thing that Moses knows is this, is that I may have lived in Egypt and I may have lived in the royal palace, but I am actually a Hebrew by blood and by birth. And that Hebrew is one of his actual kinsmen. It's one of his people. In verse 12, he looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. So Moses sees this thing happening, and even though he grew up as an Egyptian, he identifies more with the Hebrew, and he goes and he kills the Egyptian so he'll stop beating him. In verse 15, and Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian. So Moses sees this thing, he does this thing, he kills somebody, and guess what happens? He becomes afraid. Why? What's going to happen to me? I just killed an Egyptian. I'm technically a Hebrew, even though I grew up as an Egyptian, and now my only recourse is to run. Moses fled, he was afraid because he was afraid. Moses was afraid because he thought, hey, I'm going to be hunted, I'm going to be killed, or I'm going to be imprisoned because I killed an Egyptian. But here's the problem with running. Running always leads to seclusion. Often when we feel guilty, we hide. Often when we feel afraid, we hide. Often when we feel shame, we hide. And oftentimes we believe that the only course that we have to deal with our past is to actually run from it. But here's the thing. Our past is like a shadow. No matter where we go, no matter what direction we walk in, our shadow is always with us. When we run from our past and we don't deal with our past is just like a shadow. It always stays with us. You can run from it, you can bury it, you can try to forget it. But ever so often, when you least expect it, it'll pop right back up and it stays with us. And what happens is, the further we run, the more secluded we become. And therefore, we cannot move forward when we're running from our past. Because running keeps us trapped in the wilderness. And it keeps us trapped in three ways. The first is emotionally. When we're plagued by the past, it fills up our emotional capacity. The emotions we felt back then keep resurfacing. And those emotions compound and begin to affect more and more of our emotional capacity. And therefore, it leaves no emotional capacity for other feelings. If we feel guilty, guilt eventually compounds. And that's what makes us our life. That's our identity. If we feel fear, that's what makes our identity. If we feel shame, that's what we believe we are. And so running secludes us and it hurts us emotionally. It fills up our emotional capacity for joy, peace, gentleness, kindness, love, all of those things with shame, fear, all of those types of things. The second thing that it affects running is it affects us relationally. When we have no emotional capacity for positive, good emotions, it leaves us with a lack of capacity for being able to connect with others. If you're wondering why so many relationships fail, it is because of the residual effects of the past. I was counseling a couple, and this lady was sitting there with her husband, and we were talking, and I asked her, I said, what's the main issue in the marriage? And she says, he doesn't trust me. And I said, well, what does that look like? And she said, here's what it looks like. If I'm at work, he's constantly texting me. If I'm out with my friends, he's constantly calling me. Or he doesn't want someone to call me. He doesn't want that to happen. Or he doesn't want me to go without talking with him. He wants to consume every minute of every hour of every day. He wants all of it. And I asked him, I said, why is that? He said, because my first wife cheated on me. I said, has she cheated on you? No. Have you ever had suspect of cheating, that she's been cheating on you? No. I asked her, I said, are you cheating on him? She said, no. I said, do you want to cheat on him? She said, no. And I said, so here's the problem. The husband was allowing a past circumstance, situation, interaction with a previous wife to affect his present relationship. When we run, it takes up our emotional capacity, and therefore it damages our relational capacity for other people. And we begin to project on others in the present what others did to us in the past, and it leaves no room for relational connection. The final thing that running does is it hurts us spiritually. Whether we realize it or not, most of our views of God are based on some sort of relational experience here and now in the present. If our father was mean and abusive, it's hard to reconcile that God is not that way. If other believers in our lives were judgmental and lacked grace, it's hard for us to relate to God and believe that His mercies are new every morning. If people in our lives that follow Jesus were stoic and unapproachable, we view God that way. So our past can be affected spiritually because we have a problem relating to God based on the experiences of others. And so the first thing that Moses does is when he feels afraid is he runs. He secludes himself. And if Moses were just to stay there, he would be filled with that shame and that guilt and that fear for the rest of his life. And it would affect him emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. But that's not where the story ends. The second part of the story is that Moses makes excuses because of his past. Moses stutters. And God then calls from Moses from a burning bush and says, you're going to go and set my people free. And the way you're going to do it is you're just going to tell Pharaoh to go and that you're bringing your people out. And here's what his response is in Exodus 3:18. And they listen to your voice, and you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. And now please to let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Exodus 4:1, Moses answered the Lord, but behold, they will not believe or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. Exodus 4:10, but Moses said to the Lord, oh my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue. In Exodus 6:30, but Moses said to the Lord, behold, I have of uncircumcised lips, how will Pharaoh listen to me? Moses is allowing his past to define his present and his future. He's allowing his limitations to limit him from what God is asking him to do. So oftentimes we make excuses for why we don't want to follow Jesus. Well, I don't know enough. I'm not ready yet. Well, I've never led something. Well, I don't have a good speaking voice. Well, I can't sing, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. And we make excuses when we run. And therefore, we're never able to step into all that God has for us, because here's the thing. God will often use the deficiencies that we have as the method or the vehicle to lead us to the calling that He has for us. He will oftentimes use the thing that we're not great at in order to call us into our purpose. And we will sit there like Moses and we'll make excuse after excuse after excuse. We'll doubt whether we can ever reap a benefit in the future. We will doubt and we will make excuses. There's so much wasted time because we have doubted. And my dad used to tell me, he said, can't, never could. If I say that I can't ever. If I have a mentality that I can't, I never will. If I have the mentality that, I'm weak in this, I'll never be able to do it. God calls us to use our weakness because in our weakness we were made strong. That's what the New Testament says. Moses is allowing his past to define his future. Caleb was playing in his first golf tournament and he was doing great, and we were on hole 5. He plays 9 holes, so we're right in the middle of the round. And hole 5 was a disaster. He had a good drive. He chipped it up. He was on the green and he was putting for a par. And he missed it. And he didn't just miss it. Like he smoked the ball and it ran off of the green. So he had to get his chipper out and he hit it and it rolled off the other side of the green. And then he had to get his chipper out and he got it on the green. But then he hit it again and it was short. And then he hit it again and it was long. And you could see his face. His bottom lip started to quiver. You could see it in his face. He was frustrated. He was upset. He was done and all that. And finally, he made a putt. And as we were walking off, he's like, Daddy, I don't want to do this. I'm not good. And I said to him, I said, you can't let this hole beat you twice. You had a bad hole. You had a bad moment. You had a couple bad shots. Okay, we can recognize that, but you can't let hole 5 beat you on hole 6 and hole 7, hole 8, and hole 9. And there's so many of us that are allowing our past to beat us in the present, and it'll beat us in the future because we keep looking back at it and saying, oh, remember that thing that happened back there? Oh my gosh, and we're allowing that thing that happened back there to beat us now and beat us into the future. Moses makes excuses when he runs. Well, I can't talk. Yeah, you're calling me to do this, God, but you're calling me to use the thing that I'm not great at to call my people out of slavery. And God's like, yeah, that's what I do. You cannot let your past beat you twice. And luckily for all of us, Moses doesn't do that. Here's what happens. Moses then does the third step. He faces his past. Moses leads. Exodus 7:6. Moses and Aaron did so. They did just as the Lord commanded them. Now Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. Moses goes back to Egypt. He goes back to face Pharaoh. Someone that he's known, somebody he's grown up with. In a palace that he grew up in the land that he grew up in, but also the land that he killed somebody in. So think about all of this. Moses has to go back and he has to face his fear. He has to come face to face with it. And when he does that, he has to face the guy that he's known forever and known him since he was a baby. He's got to go back into the palace that he lived in. He has got to go back into the land where his people were enslaved. And he's got to go ask them for freedom after he's killed someone, and then he feels like he can't talk. So Moses has to go and face his past. Moses is going back to Pharaoh. And he's got to face his past. Because if he doesn't face his past, the consequences are far greater than if he does. And here's the reality for all of us. If we are unwilling to face our past, the consequences are far greater for us not to face our past than to face our past. And here's the point. Facing our past is the best way forward. If you want to take a forward step, if you want to move on into the future, it's counterintuitive to realize that you have to go back in order to go forward. Moses shows us that, yeah, he got afraid and he ran and he made excuses, but ultimately he said, all right, I'm going to trust God, and he went and faced his past so that he could move forward. And not only that he could take a group of people forward. There are some people watching this that are wanting to move forward, and you've been trying to move forward, but you're not allowed to move forward because you haven't gone back and dealt with the past. And whether you know it or not, you're still in the wilderness, secluded, guilt-tripping, shaming, upset, fearful about something that happened back then or a set of circumstances that happened back then. And Moses teaches us this, is that the best way forward is by facing our past. And so Moses goes and he deals with Pharaoh. I want to give you some closing thoughts. Where we're at is where God is working. Before Moses went back to Jethro, he's in the wilderness, he's secluded, he's running. But God appears to him in a burning bush. And when he appears to Moses in the burning bush, God is working in the wilderness. For those of you who are in the wilderness, I need you to know this, that where you're at is where God is working. Where you're at is where God is working. Because facing our past is the best way forward. God worked and moved in Moses in the wilderness, in the seclusion. The second thing is this, is let God define you, not your past. One of the things that we see is that God calls Moses into something. He has a new perspective and a new name for Moses. And so he doesn't allow Moses to keep the same name. And so he let God define you, not your past. God calls you his son and his daughter. And if you're not a believer in Jesus, all you have to do is believe in him, accept him, and you are his son and his daughter. But he has a different name for you than what you have for yourself. We oftentimes say things to ourselves that we would never say to anybody else. Let God define you, not your past. Moving forward changes things. When you look at Exodus 12, 40 through 42 and 50 through 51, what you see is that the people of Israel lived in Egypt for 430 years. But Moses was able to lead them out. It changed a whole people. It changed a whole nation. It changed a whole generation, because when Moses went back and faced his past, he was able to redeem the past. Because moving forward redeems the past. It cannot be changed, but it can be redeemed. Your past can't be changed, but it can be redeemed. God can take away the years that the locusts have stolen from you. Moving forward provides purpose for your present. All of a sudden, instead of just being a shepherd, Moses now has purpose in the present. Because what? He moved forward. Moving forward impacts the future. What you do today will impact tomorrow. The small areas, the small investments today will impact the future. And whether you act or whether you do nothing, it will impact tomorrow. There are some people that are content. They're content with just doing nothing. And I'm just telling you, you will impact the future as well. Because of your passiveness, because of your seclusion, and honestly because of your selfishness. Because you believe that the world revolves around you, and it's all about you, and it's all about me, and it's all about this, and it's all about that. It's not about you, and it's not about me. It's about glorifying God and leading people in future generations to know Jesus and grow with him. But facing our past is the only way forward. It's the only way forward. Because if you don't, you're going to be stuck in seclusion. You're going to be stuck in the wilderness. You're going to be stuck wandering around, guilty and angry and fearful for the rest of your life. And it will impact you emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. But Moses teaches us this. He says, facing our past is the best way forward. Because if he had never gone back to the land of Egypt, he'd have never been able to bring people forward and move forward. There's a great passage in Isaiah 43, 18 through 19. And I'm going to say the Message version. It says this: forget about what's happened. Don't keep going over old history. Be alert. Be present. Because I'm about to do something brand new. It's bursting out. Don't you see it? There it is. I'm making a road through the desert and rivers in the Badlands. That's God speaking to the prophet Isaiah. Forget about the past. Behold, I'm doing a new thing. I'm leading you in a new direction. I'm showing you a new way. In 1519, Hernan Cortez lived in the New World with 600 men. And upon arrival, he made history by destroying his ships because it sent a clear message to his men. There is no turning back. Essentially, he burned the ships. On this sticky note, I have something that I wrote. It's called Fear of Failure. Sometimes we have to understand that we have to burn things. We have to burn the past. We have to let it go up in flames so that it does not impact our future. Because facing our past is the best way forward. God bless you.